We're just waiting for the live stream to be teed up. When I get the signal, we'll go. We do plan on talking. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Marcus Fairs, and I'm founder and editor-in-chief of Dezeen, the online architecture and design magazine. And welcome to our talk, Soft Futures. I have with me an amazing panel. They're going to introduce themselves in a minute, but briefly we have Lee Edelkoort, trend forecaster, Ivy Ross from Google Hardware, and Martin Raymond from the Future Laboratory. And we're here to talk about how technology will change our lives within the next 20 years. And the talk ties in with an exhibition which you may have seen. If you haven't seen it, check it out on the way out, which is in the courtyard just by the archway that Lee Edelkoort and Google Hardware collaborated on, which is called Software. So it's all about software, hardware, hard and soft. Let me get the speakers to introduce themselves because they'll do a much better job than I would. So Lee, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a forecaster of the future, I'm an educator, and I'm a curator of design. All of these things flow from one to the other. Everything is always nourished by the things I presume will happen in the future, which is really my key expertise.
She's really underselling herself. Lee is, as you all know, one of the most influential trend forecasters in the whole world. Ivy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Ivy Ross. I'm currently the Vice President of Hardware Design for Google, but I consider myself an orchestra conductor because I work with a group of very talented designers, people, that my job is to bring out the best of them and have us all march toward a vision that we can feel good about and align to.
There's some music playing. Can somebody...
So that's for me.
Oh.
Sorry. Yeah, my name is Martin Raymond. Like Lee, I'm a forecaster, but would also call myself a futurenaut, in that we spend a lot of time traveling into the future and possibly bringing back artifacts or fragments of how that future might look. And I think the exhibition today, if you have a chance to visit it, I think has exactly done that. It's sort of open the curtain into the future, which is what we try to do, and to bring it back. But then we have to imagine what that journey could look like as we all move forward into that future. So that's really, I guess, what we would do, and what the panel here today will do as well.
So an archaeologist of the future.
Of the future.
Martin. Okay, so now, design is a visual discipline, so to liven it up a bit, we asked all of the panelists to provide 5 images to give a sort of visual story of who they're all about. So Lee, do you want to start off and talk through your pictures?
If it works. Okay.
There it goes.
There you are.
It's inevitable. Whenever you do a talk about tech, the tech
never works.
doesn't work.
I just give you a few keywords of the past, which are still inspiring the future. I spoke about well-being since 1919. It's becoming something every day more important, as you know, on all levels of industry, health, food, being, reading, being together, and so on. It's a huge, huge societal movement. Touch Tech, 1993. For the first time, I started to presume that we would become more tactile in our technology and that tactility would really be a major sort of event. And as we see now, it's happening. Is there a direction I need
Guys, where does she need to point the beamer? It's kind of
Is this the next one, or did I skip one?
That's
No.
the third one, I think.
Okay. Food, I made a book about food being the new fashion in 1992. I felt that fashion was becoming obsolete and that instead of fashion, we would be really keen on food. Well, this trend is still going on and gaining momentum almost while we speak. Almost too much, you know. Every fashion store closing is a food thing. Being Together in 1993 has become also a very important focal point because I believe that we are in need of more togetherness and that we have a sampling of family and friends and that it's so interesting that now we want to be alone and together at the same time. And being gathered together with our tools and our smart stuff, we are actually in our own sphere, but also at the same time together as a family or extended family, and I find that hugely inspiring. And then, although this is from 1989, I think it's only recently that I am really starting to explore even more what spirituality is doing to our society and how it's going to help us create new product and create new direction. We are all in need of some form of new enlightenment, I guess.
And Lee, the exhibition that you've collaborated on
Yes.
with Google was based on a trend forecast from 20 years ago.
Yeah, that
So-
was, I called it software because I thought because of all this, then we had a personal computer and we had some phones, but we didn't have really the smartphone yet, but I could feel that this was going to make a life where we would live like this, you know, together and alone at the same time and in an extended family, and that we would eat from bowls and that we would, you know, watch movies on our screens and that we would become different people, nomadic and at the same time anchored, strangely.
Ivy, what year was Google founded? Did Google even exist in 1998?
No, not yet.
Because it's interesting to think it's only 20 years ago, and in that time, Google has emerged, smartphones have emerged. It's almost impossible to imagine that we didn't have these things 20 years ago.
Yeah, now we can't imagine living with them and without them.
So our predictions of the next 20 years are inevitably going to be wrong.
Absolutely.
But talk us through your images, Ivy.
So, as you know, my name is Ivy Ross. I've had a career designing everything from being a metalsmith, my work is in museums around the world, to designing fashion, toys, other consumer goods. And currently in my role at Google, my team is made up of very much an eclectic mix of designers who, some have designed technology before, but many come from designing automobiles, fashion, products, which I believe that kind of diversity is what helps create new perspectives. We all came together in, as a group in 2016, and
I think you have to aim it in the sky or something like that.
we were tasked with this great honor of when you hold Google in your hands, what do we want it to feel like, look like, and how do we want to interact with it? I say that we're grateful for that task because I think that's a huge responsibility. We decided that one of the words and feelings we wanted to make sure was this idea of always being human, and that everything, you know, we're at a place where technology is already in our lives. We know it's here to stay, but how do we make it fit more into our lives? And how do we make it feel more human? And for us, in the design language, that was through soft curves. Even the Google Mini Home, it feels like you're holding a stone in your hand, as well as we believe that clickers should work. We also believe that people should have color in their life. We want to lead colorful lives. We want to interact with color. And, you know, Google is what we like to think of as an optimistic brand. And as a team, we decided where we wanted to make sure we always had pops of color versus in some products, if they were small enough, make the entire product in color. Now, one of the things we wanted to do in our home products is make sure that everything was beautiful and was in resonance with the furniture in your living room, which meant using fabric. But we did not want to trade off aesthetics for function. Both had to be true. So we found we had to actually have our own fabric made from threads on up just for us and able to ensure that the fabric looked good and performed well. And here is a group shot of our family of products. And Lee had come to the design studio in 2017, right before we were launching, and she looked at the group of products and said, "Oh my God, Ivy, you and the team have brought to life what I imagined 20 years ago when I spoke about software. Everything is familiar, human, rounded, and that's where the dialogue began.
Because the two of you have actually known each other for quite a long time, haven't you?
Forever.
Forever.
I remember your store in New York.
I had a design store in the 80s, which some people are now have reconnected me to. They're like, are you the Ross and Clodagh Ross Williams? Like, yeah. But no, the great thing is, no matter what, Lee has always been an inspiration in terms of, well, I call her a designer's forecaster, because as designers, I think we all have a way of taking in information, zooming out, and connecting it. And I believe you don't look at other products in the same category when you're designing products. You need to be inspired by everything, both people's behaviors, what they're craving. And so no matter what company I have been working for, the way Lee weaves things together has always been an inspiration. And when she came to the studio, it was the first time in a few years that we had seen each other. And it was very rewarding to hear her reaction.
And you worked with Martin as well. Martin was saying beforehand that you... I mean, these three between them are basically pointing us towards the future. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a scary thing, but
you could decide
they're
to
all
go
very
with,
nice people.
You could decide to go with us or not. It's always an option. Meanwhile, I feel more like the present between these two futurists. But I think we believe in non-linear time, right? It's all past, present, and future.
Just to start, I thought a quote would possibly be quite useful. And if you think about that, a lot of our time about technology, if you think about our parents and grandparents talking about electricity, they would have debated the dangers and their obsessions with electricity. Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's book, looks at the potential evils that electricity can bring into the world. This notion that at some point electricity will open a corridor or a doorway into something that is evil, like the monster. And I think a lot of the times we think of technology as the monster or the thing that's other, something that sits away from us. And what I really wanted to look at is this, what I call the age we live in now, is the age of distraction. I mean, how many times a day do you touch your mobile phone? If anybody could tell me. It's a little quiz, sorry. Okay, 2,216 times per day. Almost got it. Thinking about how many times you check it. If you are over 40, you check it about 150 times. If you are under 20, you check it about 450 times. So the notion of distraction is something that we live with on a daily basis. And a lot of us see it as being bad, but increasingly it is how we live. So we have to look at the world as it exists, not at the ideal of what we would like. Hence, this is it, the age of immersion. We're bringing technology into the space of the soul. We're closing in on the soul itself by creating worlds which connect us to alternative gates and pathways. So maybe we are getting closer to the monster. Maybe we're opening up the portal that allows this thing to come in, whatever the thing is. Is it good, is it bad? It's simply a way that the world is changing. Oh, that looks like
that's what happened to the
world.
The
world has gone dark. Okay, great. Well, actually, it's jumped.
We got there! Oh my God, let's go back.
The end.
The fourth bit of the world is the age, what we call the age of absorption, which is where we start embedding technologies. We've gone from what I call the exterior world to the sitting room, which is like, if you think about the Google products, then we're taking it inside the body. We are becoming the monster. We are animating the thing in the way that potentially could lead to great good or great bad. And the final bit of the puzzle, look, is this. The age of singularity. The notion that within 30 years, we will become the machine. We will become the household object. We will become the house. We will also become the maker himself. So really, that's what's happening in our daily life cycles. So the notion that suddenly technology plays a small part outside is increasingly changing to the fact that it's coming inside us and that we become the things that we used to look up to, i.e. to gods. So what kind of future are we creating? Is it good? Is it bad? You know, really the issue today is thinking about the aesthetics of the future, which I think is really what the exhibition looks at. We have two choices. Either these things can become the Frankenstein monster, as people would like it to be, or it can become the thing that makes life worth living. And that's really what technology should be about doing. And I see some of you frowning. But that's the question, and that's the battle we now have to take on.
Well, I think Martin's just told us what technology is going to do within the next 20 years, so we can wrap up the talk now.
Yeah.
If we choose to let it.
Yep, exactly. It's not...
Only kidding. But let's maybe start off by defining what technology is, because when we had a little chat beforehand, we had quite a funny conversation about, Ivy, you were saying that once upon a time a window was considered new technology.
Yeah, I was struck by Kevin Kelly. I recently heard him give the definition of technology, which really reframed it for me, that technology is anything that was man-made or man-invented. And so it was the window, the light switch, the sunroof, and it was really anything man invented. And if you think of it that way, because right now we think of technology as screens, and it really isn't. It is anything man creates. And you have to believe that then man decides how it engages, and we decide as society how we use it, how it evolves. But that really helped me think about this differently.
And we jokingly defined technology earlier as stuff we haven't got used to yet.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, there is, to Lee's point, there is a piece of, anybody who's ever read Socrates, I don't know if people read him anymore, but there is a piece about paper and about writing where he says that we should not have paper and we should not have pens because it aids the notion that we will forget knowledge. So by recording knowledge, the idea is that we would forget about it. And if you think about today, that's a lot of the arguments we hear about technology. That by allowing this to distract us and allowing it to become what the brain used to do, i.e. memorize things, it's damaging the way we think about the world, which is nonsense. I mean, it's historically, technology has always been attacked and threatened and challenged. And I think increasingly our job is to fight on the side of things that allow us to look at knowledge differently.
Wow. Martin, you just...
I do my best. You asked me. Sorry.
Stunning everyone into silence.
You did ask me.
You talked about this progression of the age of distraction, the age of immersion, the age of absorption, and the age of singularity. Lee, I mean, in a way, your prediction 20 years ago of softness was predicting that the divide between people and stuff and technology was going to start to break down.
To become a hybrid, and so we become... them, they become us. And I guess this will only continue. But it will continue in very new guises and with new matter also, I think. So maybe in 20, 25 years, I don't know exactly the time span, we will look at completely different tools made from totally different matter. And most importantly, I think it's changing us. It's changing our brains. That's what I really see now when I talk to people. So my belief is that we will become more telepathic, and therefore we will become a telepathic society, which is already happening a bit. You know, when you look at your phone and you want to phone somebody, he's just texting. It happens all the time now. And this is the beginning, I think, of a way we could use the internet to become more sort of brain to brain.
And when you wrote that prediction 20 years ago, did you know it was going to take 20 years to come about? Has things moved as quickly as you thought, or have they moved faster?
It's incredible how slow trends are, actually. I did a whole preview of 2020 25 years ago, and it's almost step by step, it's what's happening, which is quite... It's amazing if you look at it. So all these things do need a lot of time to really get to fruition. You know, it's not there. There's all the signs are there, but it's not yet a reality of life. Yeah. And it's now really that you can say, okay, now we're here. Nobody has yet a shop where you can buy all these things, you know, which make software, if you want, like clothes and food and chocolates and books and you know, and tools that could all be together in one space. At the time, we did a project for a Japanese store to do that. It never came about. It was way too early. Yeah, I tend to be a bit early sometimes, but you know, it always comes because otherwise I cannot even think about it.
I'm going to slightly embarrass you now, Lee. We had a conversation about 5 or 6 years ago when you were still at Design Academy Eindhoven, and you were talking about the way that technology was changing the way that students approach their work. And you said, they just go on Google. Mm-hmm. And you sounded like shocked in a kind of negative way that was somehow lazy.
It is still a negative. And actually in the United States, they have machines to detect in your thesis, you know, if you've been Googling and then you get kicked out of the course, yeah. You're not allowed to simply Google information.
I mean, do you not think also we're confusing the format with activity? Because, you know, if you think about, we learn etiquette for pretty much everything we do growing up, and nobody has really taught us the etiquette of the internet. You know, looking at how you research, how you work with mobile phones, how you connect with technology. And we do risk, I know it sounds like I'm being slightly mad about it, but we risk castigating things that are there to open up knowledge pathways for the sake that we don't understand them. It's like, you know, the Sentinel in 2001. You know, we don't know why it was there, but they didn't destroy it. They asked questions about it. And increasingly, we're refusing to ask questions about how we should use technology, how we should define it, and also how we embrace it in our lives. What part does it play in our life?
You know, I think having actually designed toys and things for kids, I came to believe by watching them, and then had it validated, that technology, even video games, at first we think, oh my, what is it doing to our kids? Yep. And then you realize the universe is an amazing designer. They are rewiring children to actually exercise a muscle that they will need for the future that we can't even see. And so even though we can look at it and say, oh, this is, you know, time wasted, it turns out it's not. It's actually training them to have a short reaction time, things that they will need in the future.
I mean, your synaptic connections become greater, but they also become different. Mm-hmm. You know, the plasticity of the brain means that you can change the brain completely using the technologies that we see are fragmenting it and distracting it. And I imagine what somebody who used to be greatly distracted, like poets were greatly distracted. You know, painters are greatly distracted. Scientists spend a lot of the time daydreaming. They enjoy distraction because it opens up newness and it opens up new ways to look at the universe.
Yeah, I mean, I think the technology makes us more creative. It's what we do with it that matters.
Exactly, because the second half of the conversation I had with Lee was to defend Google, because I basically built my entire business around the internet, and say, well, if your students are finding bad results from Google, they're not using the tool correctly. So it's not the tool to blame, it's the Googling skills. So I think I even jokingly suggested...
I was blaming really the students, because they take the first page they find.
And this
is what it is, you know. It was like too easy, and we managed to get them into deeper research via internet, of course. But in the beginning, it was quite devastatingly sort of superficial, their research. I think that has changed a lot now, but the laws are still there that you're not allowed to quote directly, like you're not allowed to quote directly of any other source.
Ivy, tell us a bit how you went from, I mean, you're in Google's hardware division, so you're still working in stuff, but tell us about your personal journey from being a designer in the physical world to working at this incredible company.
Well, I'm incredibly grateful to be in technology at this point in time, because I think, and coming from a very different background, I think maybe myself and my team just ask different questions. And I consider myself a builder. It doesn't matter, I mean, I have to be passionate about what I'm building, but I'm a builder of products, ideas, brands, teams. So it's really being able to hold a vision and have groups of people create toward it. I think the fact that I was a metalsmith and making things with my hands, even though I'm not an engineer, I understand at a fundamental level how things come together. And I think I probably represent someone who does think technology makes us more creative and also believes that we don't have to trade off function for beauty, and that, you know, when technology first started, it black with blinking blue lights, and it was always thought of, oh, well, that's just the way technology looks. And I think we had a great conversation in the green room, so to speak, about that's usually the way something new comes into the world. And then over time, once we adapt to it, there's a human craving to make it more aesthetic and make it more beautiful once it's been accepted in terms of the role it plays in our lives. We've seen that with even light switches and all kinds of things. And so it's interesting, in our conversation, we realize that that's just a natural progression that happens. And I think what Lee had predicted 20 years ago and what my team, not knowing that, created was this craving to make it more, you know, now that it's in our lives, it's here to stay, we choose how to use it, but there is no reason that it shouldn't be as beautiful and sensorial and integrate with our lives.
So wait, your team didn't Google what the future's going to look like and find Lee's report? That would have been a funny little closing of the circle.
Yeah.
but how? So you go to work at Google and to work in the hardware division. But so there must be a kind of interesting mental exercise. Like, what does Google-ness look like when it becomes a solid object?
Yeah, no, like I said, it was an incredible project for us to debate and talk about between the marketing team, the designers. It's when you hold it, what does it want to feel like? And how can we differentiate? You know, the great thing about being a little late to the game in terms of making our own hardware is that you get to stand back and go and honor and respect the different brands that are already out in this space and go, we're not this, we're not this, we're not this, what are we? And do a lot of self-reflection and really say we want to differentiate, but we want to represent our values and who we are. And you don't always get to do that. That's why I'm incredibly grateful. You know, when you come into a company that's big enough to be supportive, and you know, we are doing this because we want to take the best of our software and integrate it into hardware, because I don't think the two are separate. I think they need to dance together and really think of it as a whole system. So to be able to come with a team of people and be responsible for that, we took that very seriously. So a lot of conversation around what should that be. And then we came up,
Because it's curious, I don't know if you've seen the exhibition yet, but to look at the shapes and to look at the, I guess, the tactile nature of the product. And I actually watched a person try to steal one of the phones. Because what I know is when people were photographing, first of all, they were using the phone, a lot of them were Samsung, and a lot of them were Apple. They were photographing the phone, and then I watched them take the phone and look at it, for the first time examine the quality of the phone, the utility of it, and the sensorial nature of it. And then suddenly I realized that in that way technology had moved from being utilitarian to aesthetic and functional. And it was really, I suppose, a question in that sense, because I'm curious to see why you have chosen a route that makes it softer and more malleable and poetic. And yet I looked at Amazon, for example, you know, Alexa. I mean, the reason you shout at it all the time, it looks quite ugly. It just doesn't have a sense of it being beautiful in terms of the technology. But in some ways, it's a product of Amazon. Amazon logos look ugly. There's no way around it. You can't say it looks aesthetic. It looks utilitarian. So again, we're back in this world of the utilitarian. And I always think, gosh, you know, if the monster does appear, it will be Alexa. It will just have something in it that will go wrong. So I was quite impressed by the fact you chose this kind of soft culture approach to it, but also it wasn't what I was expecting. You know, Google it's a round-shaped word, so maybe that was part of it.
Actually, I hadn't thought about that. I mean, I do
and
know
Amazon
that
is like a hard-shaped triangle, so maybe it was, I don't know, I was curious to know how you...
Yeah, no, I mean, the circular was really more about the human form. You know,
Okay.
not the Google, the O's, but actually, you know, you bring, that was
Yep.
unconscious. I do think what you're referring to is some of on the phones, the matte finish, almost
just
is,
the-
it feels
yeah.
like stone. And I know Lee, who curated the exhibition, you know, staged it with ceramics, and it was great to just send the products to Lee and have her see it through her eyes.
Context
But
of
I
it,
do
yeah.
think yeah, people pick it up, and it doesn't slip out of your hands. It's more
Well, somebody
tactile.
tried to pick it up and not put it
Yeah.
back. That was the problem.
Well, that's
saw
quite
that.
a good sign, though, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's
If
good.
if all the phones get stolen, probably
Theft is the greatest honor, yeah.
putting their own phone down. But why fabric? Because you know, you think of this idea that objects fall into kind of stylistic typologies, like technology used to be matte black and had blinking lights all over it, and cars are always like shiny. But with a newish product like a mobile phone, for example, it was for many years trying to find its form, wasn't it? There were all kinds of weird shapes and sizes, and then suddenly it was like, oh, it's a rectangle.
And it had no buttons, yeah.
And with no buttons on it, and it was plastic initially or aluminium, and then they made the crazy decision to make it out of glass. Like, what a precious object, a technological object that breaks when you drop it. But fabric is one of the oldest kind of technologies in the world, so interesting choice that Google would put fabric on some of its
Well, the fabric
products.
came about with looking at products wanting to fit into your home, disappear, so to speak. And you know, every object we put in our home either has meaning or should add beauty. And fabric, when we thought about like how is it this can integrate, you look around a living room, for example, or a bedroom, and it's a lot of fabric. And the fabric also has function in terms of sound. So for us, that you know, we think we're weaving together technology, aesthetics. I mean, I love the metaphor of what textiles and weaving symbolizes. And you know, we were talking when we first arrived here that actually the Jacquard loom was the first computer.
Yeah.
It used the punch cards, and it actually was the first computer. So in some ways, you know, going back to that place, I also think, because we will continue to evolve our technology, and having something familiar with something new is something that I think is the best way for things to get adapted.
But it's also the intimacy, I think. Now we now go to bed with all these tools. So it's with your cushion, with your bedding, with your plaids. It's completely integrated in this slouching life we're living, and then it goes to the kitchen to do some cooking with it, and so it has become much more intimate, I think, than when we used it in the beginning, and this intimacy is only growing, I think, and therefore you integrate it more and more in all aspects of life, and therefore I think that this softness and roundness and sort of the humanness of it is so important.
I think we're also craving the relief a little bit when we are on screens. That I know myself, it's like craving sensorial senses and dimension versus flat screens. So I think it's about that juxtaposition, and it's not either or. We're living with all of it and both. And so how do we amplify what we're craving?
This is certainly a very big trend. The more screens we have in our lives, we see that our fingers become more and more in need of tactility, because now we still do this, and then it's voice, and then our hands can just become little claws, you know. So these hands feel that they need to touch, and therefore all matter everywhere designed, even soaps and liquids and everything has tactility, and will have more and more so because we have more screens. So if it's integrated, that is very good because you have sort of the balance already.
But it's interesting the point you made, Ivy, about, you know, essentially people need to accept these objects into their homes. Because I must admit, I'm a little bit disappointed, because I think if Google's going to do a phone, it could be like a slime phone made out of some high-tech space gel or something like that. But probably everyone would go, oh, yuck, I don't want that. And interesting being in Milan, like looking around a lot of the shows, that so much, the objects that you see in the streets of Milan are not thinking 20 years ahead. They're almost 20,
Retro.
30, 40 years behind. There's lots of marble still, there's lots of brass, there's lots of, you know, old school kind of stuff. So maybe you could all like respond to that a bit. Like, as technology is racing forward, almost is it a kind of trying to hold on to something from the past by making objects?
Do you think that there's
more familiar?
fear? Because there's a book which has come out, I think it's Steven Pinker's, called Enlightenment Now. And he's really looking at the fact that we suddenly fear progress. If you think about our things about, genetic engineering, we're thinking about climate change denial, how we accept that. We've got a president in America who pretty much represents all the abhorrent values of the Enlightenment, and yet his approval ratings have never been higher. And I think there is a sense that if you walk around a lot of the exhibitions, there's looking back, harping back to safety, security, tactility, which is a good and a bad thing. And I do think, I know it sounds like you kind of lecturing about it, we do need to move on and look at the future. We need to ask questions about the positioning of biotech, the position of bioprinting, looms that print real matter, living matter, how that will be used in the future. So it's great that things are nostalgic and we can enjoy a craft beer and a kind of a vegan lettuce sandwich or whatever, which I was offered today. And I said, what else could it be? Anyway, but the point is that we now need to look forward. I think there's an argument in the debate for designers particularly to embrace the next 50 years and say, if the future isn't written, and if it is probable, it's also preferable. How do we create those bridges? How do we create the roadways? Rather than allow someone like Trump or Theresa May, the citizens of the world are citizens of nowhere. I mean, how terrible is that? That we disapprove of people who want to be part of a global citizenry. And yet none of us object to it. And when I walk around the exhibitions today, we're absolutely adhering to the fact that the past is better and more interesting and has better metaphors to deliver to us as people. I mean, it's shocking. It really is worrying that we are complacent about a time in history where if we stand on the wrong side of it, we will end up destroying ourselves, not by the bomb, but by nostalgia.
I think Milan is simply so in awe of Gucci that they have Guccified the whole week. And unfortunately, he knows how to do that, but not many other people. So this is the result. It's fun, even, I think.
I must remind myself not to invite Martin ever to a dinner
party. I'll absolutely bore you to death. But
it'll terrify everyone.
I will do it in interesting ways.
Someone from the press today was talking to me, and they were saying, how come it is that sometimes designers are reluctant to change or move into the future? And I said, I don't think that. At least I know the designers I surround myself with, and that design is about solving problems. That's what we are. And so I think actually why design, and also I see design goes in waves of being popular, and right now I think it is popular again. And I think it's because we are being called to solve those problems and to help navigate into the future by designing things thoughtfully as we evolve. And so I would it's a cry out to ask all designers to really do it, because I agree with you. We have never gone backwards. We are moving forward, but it's about how we do it. And I look forward to seeing how the profession moves things forward.
I believe that we can go back, but I think we should go back to the very first beginning of time. There's lots of secrets locked into the first moves people made, in the materials they make, the matter they compose, the felts they make, the textiles they make. The pleats of the pharaohs are knitted. There's lots of super technology, and people sort of design their life into existence. And so for me, that is now the great source of inspiration, is that so not nostalgia of yesterday, but nostalgia of
tomorrow.
I agree. I think there's only so many things, right? So you have to go to the past, but bring it into the future in terms of bringing some of that ancient technology with us.
But Ivy, working at Google, you must be kind of party to some incredible visions of what the future will be like. Why don't you tell us now all of Google's secrets?
Right.
Okay, but let me rephrase the question then. But because, Martin, in your introduction, Martin, you were almost sort of painting a Yuval Noah Harari scenario of the future,
Sure, yeah.
Homo Deus, the book which sort of says that we are going to become gods. Technology will be implanted in us.
Yeah.
Do all of you see the separation like a thing, and you were talking about distraction and immersion, like touching the object? Is that just a staging post to when technology will disappear and will be inside us, or will be in the air around us, and objects, technological objects as we know them, simply won't need to exist anymore?
Well, it kind of
Ivy.
Well, first of all, some of us will become goddesses.
Good. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was speaking God in the understanding that it was neither male or female.
Okay.
But
I can only look at maybe 20 years at a time, and I think first, technology will become ubiquitous. I mean, it'll be more free-flowing, and I think still with us integrating with it, and I can only look at so much at one time. I really can't imagine technology being embedded in us. I can only see so far ahead. And yes, I have access to amazing minds, and that's a beautiful thing about working at Google is there's amazing minds that you can go have a conversation with, and it's incredibly inspiring. And it also lets you know of all the possibilities. So I think there are incredible possibilities.
Yeah.
It's really about how we navigate and guide. And right now, I see the first step as being a seamlessness between this technology, a connectivity and a seamlessness, and maybe more invisible. But we were talking about you used to hide your TVs behind a TV cabinet, right? So we already are used to hiding our technology. Beyond that, talk to me again in 20 years, and I'll tell you whether I believe in what.
I mean,
We have the reunion talk back here.
Do it, yeah. But I mean,
If the world's
you
still
do have implants. You think about pacemakers. You think about quite a lot of people having kind of, implants in the brain if you have epilepsy. So already we're moving towards that. If I said we could do an implant that will actually, there's one just being created in Silicon Valley, which will brighten your thinking by 15%. It's designed for people who have got certain types of epilepsy, where it will absolutely work against the trigger fit to create a memory that will stop this thing happening. And if you take that over to a commercial landscape or environment, why wouldn't you have that done? We take Ritalin as a way of kind of brightening our thinking using chemicals. Why not use proper biological enhancements? You're probably safer. And if they're made genetically from the body, from the same material that we're made from, kind of synthetic biology, then it's much safer. Who would say no if you had the option, a heart replacement? We don't say no to the option of a better heart. So why would we say no to the option of a better brain? It doesn't make sense. There's a fear, there's a reason against it because of the unknown, but that shouldn't stop us. If Columbus decided that he wasn't, or Marie Curie decided that she didn't know enough about X-rays, where would we be? History has always been about fear. It has always been about the unknown, and it's always been about taking things and tasting them. The implant. Children reach out and taste. That's how we discovered the first cures, our first poisons. We're mentally tasting the future, and if that means putting it inside us to better understand it, people will do it. We can't stop it. What we have to do is engage in the debate and understand that this is inevitable, but choose the pathway. Otherwise, we end up, as I said, like the monster at the beginning. It looks like it's evil, but the same monster can be bionic, and somebody who doesn't have legs will see that as a thing that will save them.
No, I agree. I think it is.
You can be my goddess. I'm already there voting.
I don't see the monster, and I think we all agree that we need our tools, and we are crazy when we lose them, as you know, lost. Mm-hmm. I think in 20 years is tomorrow. So these trends take a lot of time. So some people already have some sort of door keys in their hands, so they have digital door keys, and so it will happen. Mm-hmm. But what if you cannot, refuse any emails coming into your brain, and you have to encompass all of them? There's still a lot of things to do, yeah. to find solutions. What I believe maybe also will become important is, but maybe a bit longer on the road, is plants and roots and biotech, because in the Second World War, some things were saved because we would put, somebody would telepathically put a code into a cactus, and somebody on the other hand could be able to read the code. So it's already proven long time ago that plants are very beautiful vectors of communication, and some people call the forest actually roots like an internet of plants. So that is a completely unexplored, as far as I know. Stanford is doing a few things, but I think that, you know, you could become a bio company in the future, and just sell plants, and you know, and that would not be surprising.
Well, your point about telepathy is a really interesting one, because in a way, one of the barriers to progress is the fact that humans have to convert brain signals into language, and then use language. I mean, often you're giving a voice command to, or you're typing a word, and that's kind of, first of all, it slows it down because you're translating it into an artificial.
It's not efficient. It's inefficient.
And also at the moment, the way we interface with products is like fingertips sliding across glass, which is not a particularly seamless thing. So what Lee calls telepathy, is that something that a company like Google is exploring? Like, how can you speed up the way and kind of allow a greater vocabulary than language allows in terms of communication? Your eyes are sparkling there. Clearly,
no,
clearly
not that I'm aware of.
Oh, it's just a straight no then.
It's kind of worrying.
Do we believe her?
No, absolutely not. Telepathy can tell me it's
I know what you were thinking, and I wanted to make sure that I closed it down. I'm already there. I don't know about you.
Yeah, but also the form factor thing, because again, this is not to embarrass you, Ivy, but like Google, they experimented with glass, with having the interface on the face, but that was. Consumers weren't ready for that yet, were they? So we're still carrying around a rectangle.
Right, but the irony is, I think in 5 years from now, which at that point will be 10 years from when it was created, we will look back and say, that was the thing that blew open the possibilities.
Yep.
And what will come back to us may not look exactly like that, but this idea of distributing on our senses technology is absolutely, I believe, where we're moving. So yes, it was, as Lee says, sometimes it's all about timing. And I think it was ahead of its time, and it was a remarkable piece of technology, miniaturized. But, it was, like I said, we will look back and go, wow, that is where we have now come to, and I think it will look very different. But that idea that we will be amplifying our senses individually and calling on them to amplify our humanity through our senses and really deliver service to us as humans, is going to be
more intuitive, more intuition.
Yes.
Because that is something which is not really explored yet. The way we do things, just even without thinking. And I think these tools, if they would become much more able to read our mind, they would be much more helpful.
Well, that's what I mean when, thinking about seamlessness. Seamlessness is you don't have to act on things. Yeah. They happen a little magically because of your relationship with them. And I definitely can feel that coming.
And a lot of thinking at the moment is about using voice as an interaction device. So we talked about the Google product and the Amazon product and things like that. But is that, and my kids love interacting with Siri, trying to get it to lose its temper by winding Siri
swear
up.
Words.
But is voice really a future? Is it going to replace touch? Is it going to replace typing?
Well, people actually find voice is very natural. Speaking is very natural. So I think it's just a matter of, it's not one thing versus another. It's everything in the right place and time and use. So I think some people, speaking in the right place, maybe in the privacy of your own home and not walking down the street is right. I don't think one is going to replace necessarily the other, but I do know from our research that people believe speaking is natural versus actually typing everything.
Do you think, because I'm aware of this, to my Alexa, because of my Irish accent, it has a real problem understanding it. I have to keep repeating things, and I find that I'm now speaking in a neutral plain accent simply to make this thing understand me. And it's almost back to, the great old days of Great Britain. We had received pronunciation, where every accent was absolutely modified to sound slightly posh enough and mid-Atlantic enough to make it acceptable. And I do fear that, voice-recognized commands will turn us into a homogenous race of Swiss. That will end up being slightly Swiss, and everything will be just so and just right, but nothing will be kind of original. I think the second thing about the notion of voice that requires you, if you think about it, you command these things, you ask them. So it's also calling us to create a group of slave robots where they will do things at our bidding. How many people are polite to their Siri or to their Alexa? And how many times, if you listen to your child speaking to it, they will learn the voice of what we see as the traditional machine, which is short, sharp, and commanding. And you don't really want your children walking around. So there's a lot of work to do. So voice, I think, is one way. I think a lot of money has been invested in it, but it's probably, in some ways, equally difficult and limiting, because each speaks with a different voice. Each has a different way of looking at the world. The vocabulary used is different. And if you try using a very, three-syllable word on your Alexa, you soon get short shift on it. So we have to look at things in the greater understanding rather than assuming that the machine is the way to do it, and we work towards the machine's level. The machine's level is the lowest common denominator. As people, we have to set the bar higher for machines in the future. They have to think better than us.
Or I think machines should be here in service of us. So, meaning, I don't think that we should change how we say things to speak to the machine.
Yeah.
I think...
and it should not always have a female voice.
That's the other problem, yeah.
I'm sorry, but this is making a lot of confusion in society. Because as soon as it doesn't work, there's this stupid bitch, here we go.
Yeah,
and I think we should introduce male voices.
Mm-hmm.
Neutral, because the other problem is if you introduce, in Japan they have a lot of female voices, and when they asked why they switched to the female option, they said because it was subservient. Literally, the answer was that it sounded friendlier and more malleable and amenable. This is the 21st century, where people are still thinking as male and female as having dominant or weaker characteristics. So the argument of also voice recognition is to look at voice neutrality. How do you create a voice that represents all of the genders? There are 7 genders at the moment identifiable, and yet we only identify 2, and we only see them in relation to negatives and positives to the other. So again, there's a lot of work to do before Alexa does what they should be doing in the world, which is, as you know, it's kind of aiding, not just aiding us, but aiding us to be better people.
I agree. I think it should be aiding us to be better people.
But you keep referring to the monster. In our house, the monster is the kids, because Siri speaks, for some reason, all of our products, Siri has a male voice.
Yeah.
And they just try and get Siri to say rude
things,
words and I find myself defending Siri, and I'm like, don't talk to Siri like that. But you think that Siri would be able to do that himself and say, now children, you're being very, very rude, and I may only be a mechanical voice, but you need to treat me with respect. And the day Siri turns around and says that, and we see the look on their faces.
As we said, I think it's early days with a lot of this technology, and we need to learn from both sides, how the interactions should be. But I do know that people do find that that's a natural way to communicate. I agree that there are things that have to be modified.
We're still learning.
It's early days. Yeah. Things are going to continue to progress, as we've said about the way everything in technology has progressed.
We have to wrap up the talk in a minute, because Martin's got to get to the airport. But Lee, I'm going to put you on the spot. 20 years ago, you did a trend forecast predicting pretty much what is happening now. Mm-hmm. What's your prediction for 20 years' time?
Yeah, as I said, I think greater intimacy, even much more integrated, seamless, as you say. Absolutely using textile, but maybe not textile just to cover, but textile as a textile, which can be wired as such, so you can just there's now all these textiles where you can make your own sounds and stuff. That already is happening. So there is huge things discovered at this point in textile. And then I believe in the biomatter and in plants to help me communicate in a new way. I would be fascinated if I really could develop my telepathy. My telepathy.
Telepathy, yeah.
So I really would like to have tools where I can sort of text you without texting. I believe that we will have a mixture of voice and other things because, it's building also our culture. Like we have a return of poetry, we have a return of reading because of texting, even for people who would never do that before. And I think maybe voice will bring us into singing and theater and stuff. So I think all these things are also adding up to very new culture. And as a society, I think we will increasingly be together, alone, and together. That is a trend which will not be finished. If I go now to a library in a hotel or any hotel lobby, we're sitting all there working and sometimes communicating, rarely flirting, unfortunately. So I think the one thing I really regret in all this is the flirt. But maybe we can find a tool to bring that back.
I think you should just try it on your own.
I think there are some robots being developed that got that covered. Actually, I wanted to make a point about, we were talking about voice as a more natural communication tool, and I think technology often waits for people to find new uses for it. I found this week, for the first time, people are sending me voice recordings as messages.
Yeah.
I mean, it never happened before. Like, you're messaging people, where are you going, and people have been I've been saying, can you give me a quote for something? And they've been recording it into their phones and WhatsApping it to me and stuff like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, the last 2 days. Ivy, give us a prediction for 20 years' time.
I think things are going to be more fluid, and man and machine are going to be more intimate with each other in their fluidity. And as we go into these multi-dimensional worlds, I think we're going to crave a lot of our feelings and senses. And I think it's going to be a very creative time, actually. I'm looking forward to a renaissance of creativity, igniting our senses, and fluidity as we dance with our technology.
And Martin, without mentioning the monster...
I won't mention it. I have to agree with everybody, which is slightly unfortunate being Irish that you agree with anybody. But, the notion that we are entering a period of curiosity, of creativity, that we're bringing the sciences back together. Only in the 18th century did we separate culture and the arts from science and technology. The fact that Newton could be a scientist and be a necromancer in the same house and in the same room, that is how the world used to work. And I think increasingly technology, the magic of technology, or technology is magic, as Einstein pointed out, will bring the thing together. So perhaps a 50-year great leap forward after a 2-year of a great leap backward from Mr. Trump.
So you did mention the monster.
I did. Well done. I thought I'd just disguise his name.
Well, thank you very much. It's been plenty of food for thought. I think we're a future without flirting